What's going on, everybody? Welcome to PFF at the Combine here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Trevor, Sikkema, Austin, Gayle, Mike Renner here, covering the Combine wall to wall. And fellas, it feels so great to be back. A year off, unfortunately, because of COVID last year, but it feels so great to be back with everybody at PFF, obviously everybody in the media, getting here day one. We just covered a lot of the podium sessions with the head coaches and the GMs. Hey, fellas, feeling? You feel the energy of the Combine back this year?
It feels like a lot of normalcy, right? This was the last major NFL event we all were in attendance for before COVID.
You're
right?
right.
This was it. Like everyone after COVID, or after the Combine last year, the COVID strikes and a lot of these things come down. So it does feel like a layer of normalcy we haven't hit yet. It's this repeated piece of it. So I'm super excited. It's great to see everyone out here.
Mike, as the lead draft analyst, I mean, I know this is your bread and butter, getting the final measurements and tape and everything on all these guys. It's got to be a fun week.
This is my favorite event on the NFL calendar, and I don't even think it's close. I like this. I enjoy this week more than I do the draft week. Even like draft week's like stressful, and yeah, it's like relief to get it done. This week's like actual. Still feel the optimism, still feel the excitement of what's to come.
He's just saying that because he gets to go out to more bars than he does on draft week.
Well, that was the implied.
Because he's got to work, you know what I'm saying? Because he's got to actually do some work here. So, all right, we are one day in the books. This is obviously the early evening following the, like I said, some of the head coaches, the GMs. Not all of them. We get a couple more of these guys tomorrow as the players also trickle in. But I'm curious. We're here on day one. What are the questions that you guys really want to see answered? Because you mentioned this is such a great moment in the draft calendar and the football calendar, and it's because you get to figure a lot of stuff out, whether it's the athletic testing or some of the quotes that we heard at the podium, the rumors that we get to listen to. So, Austin, I'll start with you. What is something that you are really looking forward to finding some answers for here in Indianapolis?
I mean, first and foremost, before I even get into some of the specifics about some of the testing I want to see, a lot of this at the Combine is hearing what the NFL thinks on these players, right? It's where 100%. A lot of these mock drafts from a forecasting perspective start to get ironed out. We're already starting to see movement with Ike Ekwonu as a potential option for the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 1 overall. I'm hearing that Sauce Gardner is the consensus CB1, no one even comparing him to Derek Stingley Jr. You're hearing Drake London as this consensus wide receiver 1. This matters so much because oftentimes before this event, it's Mike and I in a silo saying, I like this guy, you like this guy. And when you get to feel what the NFL is saying about these players, what other media analysts are saying about these players, that does help. But to get specific, how fast is Chris Olave? Because I'm hearing Garrett Wilson might be a low 4.4s guy, and talking to Ohio State receivers, Sean Wade, a former Ohio State defensive back, everyone coming out of that camp says Chris Olave is faster than Garrett Wilson in a straight line. And if so, if Wilson's testing low 4.4s, do we see 4.3s, high 4.3s from Chris Olave, which I think would be mighty impressive for a guy that's currently going into the 20s on PFF's draft board right now, and even in mock drafts in the 20s. I think another piece of this too is how well is Ahmad Gardner going to test in a straight line? How explosive is Ahmad Gardner? Because compared to Derek Stingley, it's obvious that Stingley's a better athlete. But can Ahmad Gardner come in with a good weight? Some people think he could show up on the lighter 190 side at his frame. Yeah. That'll be some concern. So I do think that there's some, on these top guys, right? Let's get some actual numbers on them. Where are they going to test?
First off, I don't even know who Ahmad Gardner is. Please refer to him as Sauce.
Sauce. That's on
Come on.
That's on
Jesus.
Hand up.
Second, I use the Combine, or I think the biggest value in the Combine to me is the term Dale and Jeremiah uses, cluster busters. To when you have a guy, a group of guys at a position that you feel similarly about, well, you're going to lean towards the guy who's the better athlete at the end of the day, and this helps you in that regard. And so there's no position, in my opinion, with more top guys in a more similar vein that I see than the edge class. 12 guys in the top 15 in the PFF draft board. A lot of guys in a similar sort of, like I said, cluster on the PFF draft board that If one tests out in that cluster way better than the other, if you're talking about athletic projects like maybe a David Ajabo, maybe a Trayvon Walker from Georgia, if one comes in significantly better here at the Combine, you're going to lean towards that one and buy into what he could be in time.
I think the wide receiver class as well. I mean, it's a very – you mentioned Chris Olave, you mentioned Garrett Wilson, but another guy that I'm really looking out for is Drake London. You said his name as well. Some people have him as consensus wide receiver 1. I've heard people be worried that as a big-body wide receiver, he might run something like low 4.6s, maybe even the 4.7s. Like, I've heard people talk about that. But then on the flip side, I've had some people think that he's – clearly a 4.5 guy. I even had somebody that I was talking to this morning think that he might crack the high 4.4s, which would be kind of crazy to me if that would be the case with Drake London. But that's to say, all of this is all over the place, right?
Yeah.
To talk about a guy who might run high 4.4s or low 4.7s, I mean, that is vastly different. And so we're going to have a lot more of a solidified view of what not only Drake London's prospect profile is, but so many guys in this wide receiver class, where they're going to end up landing. But, you know, some of the uncertainty that we're definitely going to figure out is with number 1 overall. And that's what I want to talk about next, because I think people look at this draft class and they say, all right, it's not as strong as years past. But I think it brings some added excitement with it, because there's about 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 players that you could legitimately make an argument for going number 1 overall this year. So, Mike, who do you think is going to go number 1 overall at this point in time, and then who also might be in that conversation?
I still think it's Aiden Hutchinson.
Okay.
I think the Michigan edge defender, compared to his position, just compared to how good you feel about him as a prospect, is your safest bet. You're Jacksonville Jaguars. Like, Jaguars can't afford another project. They can't afford to whiff on another top pick. Like, so straight up.
Right.
And I get that you want to help Trevor Lawrence, but like, offensive tackle, the track record of rookies coming in and making an immediate impact is not strong. And yeah, you don't draft for year 1, but with the Jaguars and how bad they've been the last 2 years, getting the number 1 overall pick, things need to change and change quickly. Aiden Hutchinson's the guy who can change your defense and change it quickly with how NFL ready he is.
What about you, Austin?
What it should be is Aiden Hutchinson, in my opinion. I do think that he is the best player for the number 1 overall pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. A guy that, like you said, is hard to miss on, right? Everyone who talks about him maybe doesn't feel he has the ceiling of other number 1 overall picks, Myles Garrett's, Nick Bosa's. But what he does have is this insanely high floor with the type of character he is and the type of leadership and the type of culture he's really going to bring to what a cultureless locker room, right, in Jacksonville that's desperately looking for leaders. Now, what it will be, I do think that what we're hearing at the Combine is true. They're locking into Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu, an offensive tackle, with the number 1 overall pick.
Ike Ekwonu's odds to go number 1
are rocketing up.
Right.
On the drive here into Indianapolis, Evan Neal was minus 150 to be the number 1 overall pick. He's now minus 115. Ike Ekwonu has gone from plus 600 to plus 450. There's movement there, and for good reason. Aiden Hutchinson went from plus 200 to plus 275. There's movement away from Aiden Hutchinson, maybe wrongfully so. I think I'm with Mike that he should be the number 1 overall pick, but that's where people are leaning. Again, that's what this Combine's about. You find out what the NFL is seeing in these players and what's actually going to happen in the draft.
What about Charles Cross, the offensive tackle from Mississippi State? Because you really like him as well. I know other people potentially have him as the top offensive tackle in this class, right? He's played a ton of reps in pass sets, especially in that Mike Leach offense. Do you think he has any shot at going number 1 overall this year?
I don't. And again, it comes back to, like, I don't think any of these tackles are number 1 overall pick type of tackles, in my opinion.
Right.
But and he's comfortably, like, athletically and, like, physically, I'd say, I don't want to say a clear tier below the other guys you mentioned, but, like, those guys have rare individual traits, and, like, whether it's Neal's size and explosiveness, whether it's Ekwonu's just pure raw power, whereas Charles Cross necessarily doesn't have that single individual trait to lean his
And to add to that, I agree with Mike, right? None of these offensive tackles are maybe number 1 overall picks in previous classes, but none of these edge defenders are either, right? And that's the conundrum that the Jacksonville Jaguars are in. They don't feel all that confident in there being this consensus top player in this draft, so now they're leaning towards a position. Helping Trevor Lawrence immediately comes into effect. I think that's why they're locking in off the tackle, regardless of maybe if Aiden Hutchinson is a better overall prospect.
So you guys are kind of going with Aiden Hutchinson as that top choice. I still think it's going to be an offensive tackle, so I'll be a little bit different, but we obviously mentioned a ton of names there. It's different. Normally, when we get to this point, and even a little bit further in the draft calendar, it's almost like we know the names that are going to come out of Roger Goodell's mouth, like the first 3 or 4 names, and there's no excitement there. This year, there's plenty of excitement. And I think a big reason why there's plenty of excitement is because there is not a quarterback that is worthy of that top overall selection. But not only are we not having a conversation about a quarterback going number 1 overall, we don't know where the first quarterback is going to come off the board. And so what do you guys think at this point? Obviously, it's day 1. There's a lot of conversations that we're going to get to have with teams and scouts and media members and all kinds of things as we try to kind of figure out what might happen come the end of April. But right now, Where do you guys think the first quarterback comes off the board, and who do you think it might be? Austin, I'll start with you.
Dale Jeremiah came out with his top 50, I think, in the last 24, 48 hours, and he had his QB1 as Kenny Pickett at 28th on his big board. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's where this quarterback class is. And in previous years, PFF has had a quarterback number 1 overall, or at least in the top 5, every single year for as long as I can remember, dating back to 2017, 2016. This quarterback class is different, and then not a lot of these guys are true franchise types right out of the gate. A lot of them will need time in the NFL to develop into the franchise players they think they could be, and that's why buying into a player's development is what's going to have to happen at the top. I do think Malik Willis of Liberty has these high-end traits that ultimately teams will buy into to be this first quarterback off the board. I think he's ultimately a guy that is drafted inside the top 10, top 12, even if that's a bit of a reach considering he's not the player you need him to be now. There's a lot of comparisons being thrown around here in Indianapolis from Malik Willis to Josh Allen. He's a little bit more accurate than Josh Allen was at Wyoming, but he's also like a ways away from playing the quarterback position at a high level consistently than Josh Allen was coming out of Wyoming. I think he's ultimately the first quarterback off the board, really by process of elimination. You're buying into traits, you're buying into what he could be, and you can't wait to have Malik Willis in 3 years, right? But you're going to have him on your roster by drafting him inside the top 10, top 12 this season.
So you think it's top 10, top 12 is where we'll probably see that first guy
come off the board?
I do think that
if Malik Willis is available at 11 and the Washington Commanders pass on him, I'd be absolutely stunned.
Wow.
I do think that they want a quarterback. We heard Ron Rivera pretty non-committal on not going after a quarterback. I think there's a chance he could go quarterback at 11. If Malik Willis is there, I think they go for it.
What about you, Mike? What do you think about the situation?
I think it's going to be top 10. And I do agree that I think it's going to be Malik Willis. The team I would highlight as kind of like, I don't want to say dark horse, but like who I don't think hasn't really been paired with a quarterback much is the New York Giants. And it's because Brian Daboll did work magic with Josh Allen and realized, what you can build an offense around with a quarterback who has tools. That's Malik Willis. I mean, he can build an offense around Malik Willis. I feel confident in that. And obviously the answer to were they, sold on were they sold on Daniel Jones was he's our quarterback now. And it's like, yeah, we know he's your quarterback now, but they're not going to pick up his fifth-year option, and that's kind of not who you want to be tied to long-term if you are a new GM, if you are a head coach. So I do think that's the team with 2 picks in the top 10 that would not surprise me whatsoever if they pull the trigger on the first quarterback class.
Man, I agree with you guys. I think that right now, as it stands at the beginning of Indianapolis Combine Week, Malik Willis should have the top odds to be the top quarterback taken, and I think we saw that steam coming from the Senior Bowl, right? I mean, it didn't take much for Malik Willis buzz to kind of start out of nowhere. It's not like he lit the world on fire down in Mobile. He had a couple of good practices, and people kind of just really took to it, and they're like, oh, he won't get past the Steelers at 20 and things like that. But I'm very interested to see what we think when we do this show on Friday in a couple of days after we've kind of gotten to know a lot more about these quarterbacks.
I do think that if there was a quarterback in this class where people were more confident in him being a franchise player right away, that he would be a quarterback above Malik Willis. And the reason that he is the front runner is there isn't one of those guys, and people are buying into this development. That's why a landing spot I really like, even beyond the New York Giants, is number 8 to the Atlanta Falcons, a team that can afford to put him behind Matt Ryan for 1 year, potentially 2 years, and then develop him into this quarterback of the future in Atlanta. The worst landing spot, in my opinion, and I know this is aggressive to say, but if the Carolina Panthers go quarterback at 6 with the roster they currently have and the inconsistency they have on the outside, they just fired Joe Brady, that's where I see a Malik Willis turning into this bust people think he can be. Landing spot matters so much for all of these quarterbacks. 6 to Carolina, and we're talking about Malik Willis maybe not panning out in the NFL. He goes 8 to Atlanta and doesn't play until 2020, 2023, 2024. Then he could maybe develop into what he can be in the NFL.
Minnesota is another spot that I don't hate, right? Because you don't think Kirk Cousins is going anywhere next year, right? People have also talked about the Detroit Lions, but I don't think they're drafting Malik Willis at number 2, and I don't think Malik Willis is going to be there at 32. Yeah. So I think that fit might be a little bit tough, but I agree with you completely that it feels like you've got to give Malik Willis some time. And I know we kind of say that about a lot of prospects, but this year more than others, it feels extremely important for this quarterback class. What about somebody who's a little bit off the beaten path, if you will? Somebody who you're keeping an eye on this week. Who do we need to keep our eye on? Who's a guy that you guys are watching or that you would want to tell people, hey, watch this guy, make sure that you're keeping an eye on him?
The guy I keep highlighting, and maybe he's not too far off the beaten path, but I think it's Trent McDuffie, the cornerback from Washington. We talked earlier about Sauce Gardner being the consensus CB1 over Derek Stingley. Well, to me, Trent McDuffie is right up there in kind of a triumvirate at the top of this cornerback class. Now, all 3 of those guys, depending on the scheme you run, could be your CB1 in this class. He is that good, and I think he will put on a show here athletically just based off of his tape. I know we've seen some testing numbers from him coming out of Washington in terms of 40-plus inch vertical and whatnot, and that he's going to show up physically a well-built dude, but on his tape, he's so smooth. I think his change of direction, agility drills are going to be off the charts.
Good. He's really good. I am excited for everyone to really get to see Trent McDuffie. I got to sit down with him when doing a feature for PFF at PFF.com, and
stud.
He is just one of my favorite dudes that I've talked to. He's just so smart, and I think he's going to test really well as well. People didn't watch Washington football this year because they were not very good, and it's just like that's what it is. It was West Coast; they weren't very good, and I think that Trent McDuffie and his teammate, which you have mentioned, Kyler Gordon as well, he's somebody who I think that people are definitely gonna learn a lot more about. What about you, Austin?
I mean, people not watching Washington football is evident in the fact that Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon have both ascended as like consensus top 20 players over the last 2 weeks. Because people are now seeing that tape and know the athletes that they are. Talking to Trent McDuffie, the character he reminds me of and like the play style he has is Byron Murphy, and he's a better athlete than Byron Murphy, who was a top 40 pick a couple years ago. And I think Kyler Gordon will fit into the top 40 as well. My guys, though, too, Boye Mafe of Minnesota, who's been like an absolute rocket since the Senior Bowl performance he had. He is going to test, and you mentioned this cluster buster we need at edge. He's going to test so well that people are going to start to put him in consideration in the first round because of how athletic he is and what he could do. The other player I'll highlight, I didn't hear what you said, but the other player I'll highlight is Jaquan Brisker. Jaquan Brisker, Penn State safety, is another guy that's super explosive. I don't think has been talked about a ton in this class. I don't think the safety class in general has been discussed in media a ton because there's a consensus safety one. Kyle Hamilton, and then no one's talking about the safety class. Jaquan Brisker at the top of the second round, I think, is becoming one of my favorite picks. I think the safety class in the second round really does start to flex with Lewis Cine of Georgia, Jaquan Brisker.
I think Jalen Petrie from Baylor as well.
Exactly. I do think that there's a lot of talent in the safety class, and I think Brisker shows up this week.
I'm a highlight linebacker. There's two linebackers. Leo Chanel, the linebacker from Wisconsin. I said the last name right. We were working on it before the show.
Love that.
And then also Chad Muma from Wyoming. Chad Muma, I think, is going to fly, okay? He's a former safety. He's put on some extra weight, but you see that in how he plays linebacker, how he's able to drop back in coverage, how he can play in man coverage as well. Like, he's just so fast to exactly where he needs to go. It's so smooth moving. He can pursue really well as well with that speed. And I think that he's going to impress a lot of people with what he puts up in the speed portion of the athletic test. And Chanel, dude's going to bench a lot of reps, okay? Like, he's got a video, I think, from 2 years ago.
2020.
Of him just repping out 225. I think he goes for almost 40.
No, he does 40 on the dot.
He does a 40. Now, I watched the video. I'm not going to be too much of a stickler because he'll beat me up.
Oh, no.
But the lockout, look, I mean, like, that's something that they're going to count here. But he could
2 years ago, though.
He could threaten, right? He could threaten that linebacker combine bench record, which is, I think, 40. I think it is 40 on the dot, so he might be able to overcome that. So those are two guys that I'm
He also, so he has that video of him doing 40 reps at 225. He has another video of doing 18 reps at 315 in that same year.
Which one's more impressive?
18 reps at 315. That's absurd.
Insane.
That's literally, people would pray to do 18 reps at 225.
I'd pray that I don't die if I put
315 to 18 reps, dude. That's something I've never seen before. I've never seen video of that. That's insane.
And those two guys are two of my favorite scheme sort of specific linebackers where it's like if Leo Chanel goes to a Patriots Belichick type of scheme, he's going to be a monster. If Chad Muma goes to a Matt Eberflus sort of defense here in Indy or out in Chicago, I think he's going to be a monster. A defense that just lets him fly to the ball recklessly the way he did at Wyoming, that guy with that speed and his ability to cover ground, those are two guys that if they go to the right scheme, impact day one type of players.
Something that really stood out to me with Matt Eberflus's introductory press conference is how many times he used the word fast. And I get it. Every coach wants a fast football team, right? I mean, like, that's just what every coach is going to tell you. But he used that word so many times that I genuinely think that Chad Muma is a decent target.
That's a Ballard mantra, right? Coming from Chris Ballard, Indianapolis Colts GM, Matt Eberflus obviously coming from Indianapolis. Mike has brought this up a ton, but Ballard brings up, on defense you need speed because you're constantly playing catch-up. You're reacting to the offensive player every single play. Every play, the offense is dictating what you do. If you're not playing catch-up with speed, you're going to lose.
All right, so we had a couple of quotes that we want to get to from today's podium sessions. The first one that we want to get to, Tampa Bay Buccaneers general manager Jason Licht. He was talking about wide receiver Chris Godwin, who is set to hit free agency, and there's a lot of fan bases out there that want to see Chris Godwin on their team, but Jason Licht with a little bit of a not so fast, my friend, when he was at the podium earlier today.
Been a special player as well for us. He's really overachieved in relation to where he was drafted and where we got him. It's hard to imagine Buccaneers offense without Chris Godwin, and love to have him back. and we'll continue to try to work towards that.
All right, so I don't think Chris Godwin's going anywhere. I didn't believe that Chris Godwin was going anywhere for the longest time. I've never really swayed on that. The Bucs and the people that I talked to down in Tampa still, they've never made me feel like he was going anywhere. But I don't know. Are you guys still holding hope that you might see him in a different uniform?
I mean, I actually had a different opinion. I thought when Brady was back and all these, they were trying to bring a lot of other players back, I thought Godwin could be the odd man out. But now that Brady's gone, Marpet's retiring, Jensen could leave. I mean, they have to bring some of these guys back. I mean, they have to bring some of this talent back. So I do think now Godwin's probably a lock to come back. I think the quote he had there where he's like, I can't imagine a Bucs offense without Godwin. I don't think we'll see one soon.
Right.
The thing is, though,
don't
we love to
do
have
this
Godwin.
to me, Mike. Don't do it.
Carlton Davis ain't going anywhere.
The Packers need him.
Carlton Davis ain't going anywhere.
That's true. That's true.
If Chris Godwin ain't going anywhere, you're paying CB1 money and wide receiver 1 money in the same offseason. Yeah, you could probably take Carlton Davis, but you can't double take Chris Godwin also and fit that money under your cap. One of them's going to have a tiny cap hit this upcoming season and push some of that down the road. So it's going to take some cap magic to do so. I think coming off an ACL, if you're going to choose between him, Carlton Davis, or him, if you're kind of having to make some budget cuts here, I could choose Carlton Davis.
Mike Greenberg, he's their cap guy down in Tampa. He's worked some wonders before. I think that he'll be able to do it again.
Coming.
I don't think that Chris Godwin is going anywhere. The next quote that I wanted to talk about is from Chris Ballard, the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, right here in Indianapolis. And boy, did he have some words to say about Carson Wentz. He was about as harsh on a current quarterback as you were going to hear any GM at the Combine. You guys got to listen to this.
Are you any closer to a solution at quarterback than you were at the beginning of January?
That's fair. I don't know. We're still working through it. And I know I'm going to get a lot of questions about Carson right now. And I don't have a direct answer for you. We're working through it. Jim, Mr. Irsay, and Frank and I will sit down over the next 10 days and figure out where it's going. But ultimately, we'll do what's best for the team, for the Colts, both in the short term and in the long term. I think as we sit down and work through whether Carson's the long-term best answer or not is the best way I can put it. We're not there yet. I'm not there yet. And that's something that we'll talk about as a group and move forward. And whatever decision we make will be the best one for us.
Look, if I was as much of a betting man as Eric Eager, I'd probably bet my entire house on the fact that Carson Wentz is not going to be on the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, that's brutal. And Frank Reich, the head coach in Indianapolis, he wasn't any nicer. You know, he said, like, I stuck my neck out there for Carson Wentz. This is Frank Reich who also said this. He's like, I stuck my neck out there for Carson Wentz. I still think he can be a good quarterback. But then he threw in it might not be here. And, like, if you have any of kind of reservation like that at the podium in Indianapolis, that means that, the days are numbered, right? That's
what I was going to say, too, right? Like, it's one thing to be non-committal on a quarterback. It's another thing to be public about it, right? So many of these teams, so many of these leaders, in the front office we are 100% all in on our quarterback right now. And then once you aren't, that public thing comes out. I do think that they are non-committal, obviously, on Carson Wentz. The issue I have is what are they going to do? Like, they invested a lot of capital in it. They don't have a first-round pick in this year's class. There's a lot of cap space dumped in already. Carson Wentz, like, they're not going to Jacob Eason here. I just don't understand what the plan will be to get out of the Carson Wentz situation that isn't just playing him until this bet is sunk.
Well, getting out of it would just to cut him. Use that money elsewhere. Sign in Jameis Winston, for God's sakes. Like, because you had Carson Wentz, and like,
you should ask Ballard that
because it is a sunk cost at this point. Those picks, they're gone. You ain't getting them back. And so, if you want to roll into another season thinking you're going to get different results from Carson Wentz, when probably he's not going to have as good an offensive line, you're not going to bank on getting Jonathan Taylor being that far the leading rusher. Like, guys will probably regress in some way, shape, or form. He'll probably have a little bit lesser of a situation around him, and I think he's going to take a next step. I don't think it's going to happen. So go elsewhere at the position because, like I said, this was a good team and missed the playoffs last year because Carson Wentz.
The more you call that out, it's like when I say I don't know what they're going to do, they're obviously not going to get like an obvious upgrade over Carson Wentz. Like, they're not going to go make a massive play for an Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins. They just don't have the capital to do it. But the name I do like, and we've had conversations about this before, I'm going to throw this out there. Gardner Minshew coming to Indianapolis. I think they might make the playoffs with Gardner Minshew as the quarterback for Indianapolis because that's the type of football they want to play. really good defense, run the football through Jonathan Taylor, a really good offensive line, and don't make mistakes. The Jameis Winston call-out, it's like, do they want to hit lightning in a bottle again? Like, playing with a quarterback that's such a roller coaster is so not what this team needs, right? They don't need to hit lightning in a bottle. They just need consistency throughout.
Do they need to trade more picks, though?
No, they don't. They don't. But Gardner Minshew's gonna, not going to come in with a healthy pick, maybe 6th rounder. I don't know what it'd be.
I'm excited for when we are sitting here in the year 2034 and we are still asking, well, why doesn't this team just sign Jameis Winston? Right? Jameis Winston. That's what it's going to be. It's just going to be the question that never ends. Another question that we had that came up a lot, especially over the last couple of weeks, kind of felt like out of nowhere, was with Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. And all of a sudden it was like, Eric Bieniemy once again did not get a head coaching job during the offseason. And then it was like, he's got a disgruntled relationship with Patrick Mahomes and with Andy Reid, and Andy Reid, again, got up to the podium. And before anybody even asked any questions, he cleared the air about everything that's going on with Eric Bieniemy, who is now back in Kansas City as the offensive coordinator.
The whole thing with Eric Bieniemy has gotten kind of fabricated. We were on vacation, and over the 2 weeks I came back, and all of a sudden it was like I didn't like Eric, and Eric didn't like me, and Pat Mahomes, and everybody else, and that's not the case. I mean, we all get along good, and I'm glad he's back with us and rolling. So I thought he'd potentially get a head coaching job, which I would have been happy with too, but that's not how it worked out. So anyway, I just want to put that to rest.
I don't think there's any reason to think that things are going to change in Kansas City, especially with the gang all back together, with Andy Reid, with Eric Bieniemy, with Patrick Mahomes. They're going to be good again. It's going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL, and I think that we're going to see them make some additions in free agency in the draft, of course, but I don't think – it's just going to be more of the same in Kansas City, and I'm glad that Andy Reid was able to clear up the air with that.
I've always felt with the Eric Bieniemy stuff, I think this has come up every offseason really since he's had a lot of success with Patrick Mahomes, is why isn't he getting a head coaching job? Why isn't he getting a head coaching job? Why isn't he getting these interviews or landing these gigs? I think it's a lot of it has been fluff and not a lot of substance. I think the only substance people are clinging onto is the fact that Bieniemy isn't getting these jobs, right? But my take is why are you leaving Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid until it is an ideal situation? I don't think one of those has opened up. And honestly, maybe some of them have. It's still a very competitive role, obviously being a head coach in the NFL. I just don't think we should be giving him, he should be getting this much flack for not landing a position when he's in like one of the most ideal offensive coordinator roles in the NFL.
Right.
To play devil's advocate here, though, just say that if I was a head coach, I'd come out and say the same thing, that no, there's no smoke behind. You don't want to say it. You don't want to come out and say there was internal issues that we resolved.
You
want to say there's nothing. Well, I'm just saying you want to give the opinion that all is well on this front. And I think that's a bit of the case here. Like, there is too much smoke for there not to be something really not to be something of substance to a degree underneath the surface, because they weren't exactly committal with what they gave him as extension-wise over the course of this offseason. So I just think there probably is something. It probably did get resolved. It's probably not a big deal going forward. But I think that we're to just hand-wave it away as if, this was a complete fabrication of a report. I don't see it.
I'm shocked that the guy on this show who is on The Bachelorette wants there to be drama somewhere that he can continue.
Is Eric Bieniemy there for the right reasons?
Yeah, that's what you got to ask.
That's a good question. It's a good question.
All right, the last clip that we're talking about before we get out of here, George Paton, the general manager of the Denver Broncos. A lot of big questions, right? Because not only does he have quarterback questions this year, he had quarterback questions last year, and he passed on that quarterback class, and now he's kind of in a situation where it feels like it's Aaron Rodgers or bust, and he's kind of in a tough spot, but he talked about what his approach is for that quarterback position earlier today.
I think it's always a priority. It's the most important position in sports, and so we're always looking. And we do have Drew Lock under contract. We have Rip, but we're always looking, and we're gonna, no stone unturned to find that guy. We know we need better play out of the quarterback position, and so we're going to be aggressive.
So, guys, what do we think about where the Denver Broncos are at quarterback? Because, sure, George Paton is saying we want to get aggressive. He says they're going to leave no stone unturned. They're going to look at all of their options. But at the end of the day, looking at all the options and then being able to capitalize on any of them, thinking that they're going to help the team as much as they could, those are different things. So I don't know. What do you think about Denver's quarterback situation right now?
One, of course they're going to get aggressive. Their quarterback room stinks. Like, they have to get aggressive if they're going to maximize the talent on this roster.
You're right.
It's not good. It's not good. But the problem I have with this is that why weren't they this aggressive last year?
Right.
They were in a prime position to capitalize on what was a good quarterback class, where we had 3 quarterbacks in our top 3. Like, first 3 players on that board were quarterbacks, and they had an opportunity at Justin Fields. And the fact that they were one of those teams that passed on a quarterback prospect like Fields or Mac Jones, who had the offensive rookie of the year last year, or no, behind Jamar Chase, could have been offensive rookie of the year. They pass on those quarterbacks to get aggressive this offseason. That doesn't make any sense to me. For a second-round investment, obviously, in Drew Lock, Eagles pass on him for Jalen Hurts. Panthers pass on him for obviously the second-round pick they sent on Sam Darnold.
Right.
It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me from a roster-building perspective to now we're getting aggressive. It's like you need to get aggressive every year you have a bad quarterback. And guess what they had last year? A bad quarterback.
I think they got caught up in the Aaron Rodgers thing, though.
Yeah,
I think they realistically thought
they had
You
him.
can't afford to do
bridge
that.
was
though.
going to
They
get burned.
caught up in this
They shot for the
fairy
moon.
tale.
Well, they shot for the moon. You shot
did.
for the moon, and they got burned by it. And that happens. But, again, I think this is kind of the reaction to that. It's like, yeah, we're going to get aggressive. We're going to take a shot now because our shot last year got basically nixed.
Yeah, they didn't shoot anything, though. What did they shoot? They didn't shoot anything.
I mean,
I think they were
Just waiting? They just
get
waited out?
Look, I'm.
they get Aaron Rodgers, though. They were Super Bowl 10.
No,
you know,
they
like,
are.
that's what I'm saying.
They are.
But
if they draft Justin Fields and they still trade for Aaron Rodgers, what's the point? I mean,
Right.
you can't
Right.
at that point.
Why not? You trade Justin Fields to the Packers.
You can't trade a quarterback you just drafted and signed. It's like it's the signing
I think
bonus.
you can.
is-
You're a
No.
little bit-
You're a little bit diabolical here, and I don't hate it.
I'm just
I
saying
don't-
from
I-
a cap
I don't
perspective, you
hate it.
can't do that.
I don't hate it. I don't hate the idea. Look, you're bringing up salary cap. I don't care about the numbers. I hire somebody else to care about the numbers. But no, okay, obviously that's very interesting. But guys, any parting shots before we get out of here?
Excited for this week, man. This has been a really good show,
Yeah.
and I'm excited to get more quotes. We got players small, right? We're talking quarterbacks, wide receivers, I believe. It should be a good one.
I think that's just it. It's that great to be back in Indy and gonna have a good ass time.
Mike's ready, Austin's ready, I'm ready. Hope you guys are ready too. It's gonna be a long week, and we're gonna give you all the coverage that you could possibly imagine, whether it's on social media or here on the shows as well. We will see you guys same time, same place for tomorrow. We're gonna recap a lot of the player interviews as well as some more GM interviews as well. We'll see you guys then.